Hey everyone, have you ever had a time where you had a combat that you just didn't want to run fully and you wanted it to go quickly? Maybe it was a wandering monster or something like that. Have you ever had a time where the players had kind of a side quest that they wanted to do, but you really didn't want to play it out because there was just too much complexity, you weren't ready, or what have you? Well, there is something in Savage Worlds called Quick Encounters, which might just be right for that.
Savage Worlds, one of the best games today.
Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. As always, look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Please subscribe, like, support us in our mission to bring Savage Worlds to everybody and how awesome the game is and rules and reviews and all sorts of stuff like that. So if you support us, that would be great. You don't have to, but you could subscribe. So anyway, what am I talking about today? Today I want to talk about quick encounters. So what is a quick encounter? Well, a quick encounter is a way to take something that's complex, that might be a multi-round, might require a lot of time, and finish it with just some narrative elements and a single die roll per player character. And where would you see something like that? Well, let's say you are a game master and you have the dangerous orc forest, and you really want that danger to come through. So you have wandering orc bands that come up against the players on occasion. They run into on their way to the main lair. Well, you don't want to necessarily run each one of those combats, so you could do a quick encounter that resolves it with a roll. Players can move on, but they get that sense of the danger that's in the woods. How about you wanted to do something like rescuing a prisoner from a camp that has a bunch of bad guys? Well, you could run it as full adventure where the players go in, they track through, you got the battle map, what have you. They go up against the guards, everything you could do. Or you may say, this isn't really, they just need this person for the information they have, and maybe it's not really the important element of the story, and so you want it to go quickly. So again, you could do that with one die roll. And then the last time a quick encounter might be really useful is when you're running low on time. I use quick encounters in convention games all the time because sometimes the time goes long, and so one of the middle encounters, quick encounter gets it done so you can get to the big encounter at the end. Or if you're at the end and the players are fighting it out and you say, hey, we just don't have enough time, let's do a quick encounter and see what happens. So there's lots of times when you can do quick encounters. So let's start talking about the basics. So the basic of a quick encounter is each player has a turn, and it doesn't matter which turn or order they go in. There are no action cards. We're not dealing out action cards. The players can go in any order they want that makes sense as part of the narrative. So in my one where we're trying to get a prisoner out of a camp, one of the players may want to set a bomb over by some trucks, blow them up, create a diversion, have the guards go over there while some other of the players set up Overwatch, and when those guards come, they pick them off. That decreases another guard, so another player can help stealth somebody in, and then that person might use their thievery to open the lock on the cage and get the prisoners out. So you can see everybody has something that they're trying to do to get to this ultimate goal. So I said before it's a single die roll per player character. So how do you determine the skill that makes sense? The skill that makes the most sense is the one that kind of is aligned with the intent of what's going on. So in my example, we've got the bomb setter, the demolitionist. He wants to set a charge, and he might have a really good level of repair, and we're going to use repair for setting bombs. So he may want to use that repair to set the explosive, and that's kind of the intent of what he's doing. Now you may say, well, he needs to get in position, he needs to get to the cars. Isn't there a stealth roll in there? Isn't there some other things? But again, that's not the whole idea. Is to do this in a single roll based on sort of the main intent of what the player character is doing. If we wanted to run a stealth scene and then we wanted to run them picking everybody off one by one, well, then it's not a quick encounter. It's just a standard everyday combat or stealth mission or what have you. So quick encounter, what's the main intent? That's sort of the skill that we represent and we take examples of. So in my example, I've got the demolitionist who's using explosives, going to do repair. We got somebody who's overlooking, who's going to try to take some guards out. He doesn't have to make them lethal. Maybe he's just trying to injure them, what have you. And so he would probably use a shooting from up high. We've got somebody who's going to help the other person get into position so he can pick the lock. And so maybe he's doing a support role using stealth for this other person's thievery because he's helping him through some actions to get there. So once you pick the skills, and the book gives some examples of different skills you might use. You can go through them, but they talk about the different skills that might be used for a chase, might be used for combat, things like fighting, shooting, an arcane skill, a heist, which might have hacking, notice, stealth, thievery, that sort of thing, missions, treks, and so on. So once you have that skill defined and you know what you're doing, then it's up to the game master, based on the situation, based on some of the narrative even, that the players have defined, will define sort of a penalty or bonus, -4 through +4. So in a case with our person who's setting the bomb, we may say, well, there's a lot of guards, it's tough, it's going to be hard, so we're going to give you a -2 on that repair roll. So that helps define, make things, maybe they're harder, maybe they're easier, maybe there's something that because this person is going to get the guards, later thing, the thievery roll is maybe at a plus because it's an easy lock and there's nobody holding them back and nobody getting in the way. So define the circumstances that goes through. Now the book, I'm not sure if I read it right. It kind of makes it feel like you get one penalty or bonus for the entire quick encounter for all player characters. I don't do that. I have the circumstances based on what the player character is doing and how they narrate it and what they think they're going to do. But that may or may not be raw. I don't know. Why don't you in the comments tell me how you interpret that rule and let me know what you do. That would be cool. Then we can all learn together. So then once you have that, we talk about making that die roll. Again, you're doing it in the order that you define. So for my example, first, the player is going to do the bomb. So he's going to roll his repair. Then the shooter is going to roll his shooting. Then the lockpick's going to roll his lockpick with the support of the person who's helping him stealth in. So all that we roll one at a time. Now, encounter results could be if one of those fail at any time, the encounter's over. So if I fail to set the bomb, and it fails, the Game Master may define that that just means the whole thing fails and it doesn't happen. They may say that changes the circumstances for the other players, may give them more penalties, may make them have to rethink what they're going to do. And that in the book they call a staged encounter, which is if there's new information or previous steps fail, it might lead to a future action by a different character. So all of this kind of happens at the same time. So players make their rolls. We determine success, failure as we go along, and kind of the net of the issue, net of what happens is defined by kind of the type of thing it is. So if it's a dangerous encounter, the book is very prescriptive and says if the character fails his role in a dangerous situation, he takes a wound or D4 wounds on a critical failure. If he's the driver of a vehicle, it takes a wound. Wounds may be soaked as usual. Success means the hero emerges only with bumps and bruises. Remember, that's a fatigue at -1. And a raise means he escapes unscathed. So in a dangerous encounter, it's very descriptive. So for non-lethal encounters, it says something may happen that if it's not physically dangerous, the book talks about maybe social stigma or breaks a piece of vital equipment or something like that. And this now talks to the staged encounter, right? So something happened, maybe it's not lethal, but it's going to make other things more likely, more difficult, or the person has to change their plans, what have you. How we talked about rolling and getting success. So success is defined by if there's at least one success per player character for something that is kind of measurable in that way. So in combat, you want to have 4 successes if you have 4 player characters. In something like a heist, again, you may have one failure that makes the whole thing go. And so it's all a narrative piece, how we determine whether that's a complete success or what needs to be done. But generally, we're talking about one success per player character. Now, if a player fails and it doesn't significantly change what's going on, they may, and you keep rolling for different players, another player may get a raise, which then gets that +1 for the player who failed. So they could still get that for just kind of almost like a dramatic task, right? You're trying to get those number of successes, and one player doesn't, another player might get it through a raise or what have you. So that's kind of the basic of the results. So we're looking at the situation, narratively defining where we think our characters would be working. That helps define the kind of intent, and based on the intent, that gives us the skill we're using. Players then roll one at a time in the order they define. If somebody fails earlier, it may impact later stuff. It may change how things happen. And then if it's a dangerous encounter, you could possibly get wounds, get bumps and bruises. If it's a non-lethal, you may have other consequences, but it may also impact how well things go later on. So getting back to our going through and trying to get this prisoner out, we set the bomb. Let's say it goes off. He gets his success. Then the shooters go, but let's say the shooters fail their roll. And so they weren't really in danger. So it's not really a dangerous encounter, but the way it happens, maybe they run out of ammunition, and so the player doesn't have ammunition for the next fight or what have you. I don't know. You can define it as you want, as they narrate what happens and how things go. So what did that do? That may then change what's happening in future areas, right? So instead of the player characters who are going to sneak in and open the cage, they may have to fight their way in. So now the real intent may end up the person who is going to support with stealth. Now they need to use fighting, and they may have to do fighting at a -2 or something as far as their bonus or penalty goes, because now there's more guards. It's not easy, but they still could potentially have a success if they succeed, and maybe the guy who's picking locks gets a success or a raise. And so maybe there's still a chance they succeed, even though the situation has changed underneath them. So last thing is, in combat or in things that you're doing which require resources, the book says the resource usage is based on the mass battle rules. And for an arcane skill, they'd use 3d6 power points. A character with range fire weapons would use their weapon's standard rate of fire 2d6 times, and then define the ammunition used based on that. So that's a quick encounter. It can be used for multiple things. It can be used just for combat, easy for that. It can be used for something that isn't main to the story, but could be an adventure in and of itself, a complicated set of tasks. Not necessarily like defusing a bomb, because that would be more of a dramatic task because of the tension that has. But like I said, going in and rescuing a prisoner who has information you need for your main story arc, maybe you don't want to play that out. My players had a base that they set up in one of my games, and they wanted a automatic weapon to mount on it, and they knew that they could steal it from a local kingpin who, was a weapon stealer. We could have done that, but it was just something for their base. So we used a quick encounter to say, how did they go through this heist to get in and steal this weapon from this boss? Now, funny thing is, in their case, they actually succeeded after having a kind of a failure for one of the players. And remember, for a non-lethal situation, and this was non-lethal, they might have social stigma, they might have something break, something could happen. Well, in their case, the big boss knew who had stolen it. So that led to another interesting set of adventures just through this quick encounter. So that's quick encounters. They're really straightforward, really simple, really cool to keep the story moving along, get rid of the boring stuff. I don't use wandering monsters. I don't like them so much, but this would allow you to use wandering monsters in a sense of showing the danger of the dungeon or making sure that players are moving quickly through the dungeon, because that's what wandering monsters are for, is to give them sort of a kick to keep moving. But you could use quick encounters and not necessarily do a full combat that bogs things down and slows things down. So that's great for that. Great for heists that aren't important. Great for just a whole bunch of stuff. And if you're running out of time, it's a good way to close the story. Maybe you're doing a West Marches game, and so the players have to be back to the base after every adventure. So West Marches, maybe a quick encounter at the end to see what happens for the last battle if you're running out of time and them getting back to town. Maybe it's a quick encounter. So there you go. Quick encounters work really well. They do a lot of stuff. They help speed the game along in situations where it makes sense. I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Again, look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We hope you support, like, subscribe, and throw your comments down on how you use quick encounters, whether there's a cool situation you used it in. And we'll talk to you. Bye.
Savage World, one of the best games today. Savage World, Benny, enhance my play. Savage World, different setting any day.